Hey, what's up? This is your girl Diamond. How are you? I am here and I have a special guest from over the pond. So, how do you pronounce your name, first of all?
Kuchenga.
Kuchenga.
Kuchenga. Yeah, that's
Yes,
it.
I don't want to ruin it because I'm bad at pronouncing names. And I've been knowing you for years.
Yeah, as long as you just deliver it with that African strength, yeah, I don't mind.
Yes, Kuchenga.
Yeah, my father's firstborn.
Oh.
So yeah, basically Mufasa wasn't ready to have a trans daughter, but yeah, alas, here we are.
So you are a writer. That's what I know you as. You are a writer. You are a trans advocate, and you have been supporting my work for a long time, and I've been supporting yours. And I wanted to have you here because I wanted to make a connection with some trans folks over in the UK because that is one of our largest demographic outside of the US. And so I wanted to exactly. So I wanted to see what the state of transness is over there. So I said, who is the perfect person to come on than you? So I was like, sure, come on.
Wonderful. Yeah, I mean, I'm not there right now, but as a British national, and yeah, I'm from North London, born and raised. So yeah, I'm more than ready to talk about the state of my country.
So before we get started,
who's the most? It's who's the most embarrassing? It's in the UK. Yes, we'll have Brexit, and you'll have Trump, and we've got loads of coronavirus tests. You got loads of coronavirus tests.
I think we got y'all. I think we got
y'all. Just coming
y'all trailing behind. Y'all gotta catch up.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, in the imperialist Olympics, OGs, so yeah.
We the OGs, man. That's what it is. So before we get started, tell the audience exactly what you do and what your place in community is there.
Sure. So, I'm a hustler, and
as we all.
What I discovered was that when I transitioned, I then became unemployable, and this was, in the British sensibility, oh, it's because you're overemployed, or maybe that one's not right for you, maybe it's underemployed, whatever. But in terms of, just the general state of play, I just found that I was not able to employ myself through the legitimate mainstream channels that I got used to, because before I transitioned, I was kind of muted. I was the token, and, I was seen as non-threatening and everything. So I then went to rehab because I had a severe issue with drug and alcohol addiction, and this December I will have been sober for 5 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, I know, still here, one day at a time. But one of the benefits of getting into recovery was that I discovered that I was a writer. So I was in rehab, and that's just all I could do. I had a copy of Janet Mock's Redefining Realness as well. So along with my sobriety literature and stuff, I was also reading that. And, I left rehab with a mission to tell my story, the story of other people, those who are marginalized. And I also decided to get involved. I needed to give back because I knew that the only reason that I had survived homelessness and everything was because people had taken time out of their lives to support girls like me. So it started with writing for Bent Bars, I volunteered for them as well, doing admin. But Bent Bars is an LGBT prison pen pal service. And so I started to write to trans girls in prison. And because of that, I learned about TGJIP, the Miss Major's organization out in the Bay Area.
In San Francisco, yeah.
Right, and stuff. So because of that, I then started to, and then when I come to the US in like the late thousands, and I met Angela Davis, and I read Our Prison's Obsolete. So when I started to get involved with Bent Bars, I was compelled to like learn a lot more about, you know, abolitionist politics and everything. And so that went really well, and I made connections with girls on the inside that were like just truly transformative. And then Black Lives Matter reached out to me, Black Lives Matter UK, and to support us. We were doing a vigil outside the prison in North London, outside Pentonville, so they came on to support, and so I got involved with them. And because I was involved with them in terms of like doing like social media stuff, like I think I was kind of like Facebook coordinator of sorts, and I started to get a few media connections. So GalDem, which is a women and non-binary people of color media platform out here, they gave me my first writing assignment, which was writing about Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, which you made a video out of. I remember watching it at the time. And stuff. And yeah, that was, you know, I really wanted to try and make it like nuanced and stuff, because I know that journalistically, like, people love you to be like angry and reactive and stuff, but this was like my auntie, you know?
Yeah.
And stuff. So, you know, like there were like, you know, bum notes of disappointment, but I was like really trying to make sure that, you know, I didn't want to cast her out and have her cancelled and like, you know, destroy her books and stuff. So I got used to having an intersectional approach to various issues in my writing. And so because of that, I came to the attention of Wear Your Voice magazine. And so, yeah, I was writing for them for a long while. And then I just kind of built step by step. So I then went on to write for Vice and ID and Dazed, and then British Vogue got in touch in like November 2018 when they're doing a trans rights campaign, and so I wrote for them quite a bit last year. And then most recently I did my first video essay for Netflix on disclosure and stuff. So yeah, it's been a wonderful like little ascension, but you know, like we're in this you know, this digital time where we're I know that there's been an expansion in media and there's more of these platforms, but when I read Dr. Tressie McMillan Cotton's book Thick, a collection of essays.
Whoa!
Oh, literally, I mean, she gathered me. She got me right together, because here I was thinking I was all special, you know, and stuff, like not knowing that, you know, this like think piece industry is like a real thing, you know, and I'm here feeling bad about myself that, you know, these editors, you know, like shunting me a few shillings and shekels and things and stuff, and I'm like, five. And yeah, this is part of, you know, the suppression of our communities, you know, never really getting the paid staff position and stuff. So I was always on the outside of things. So yeah, you know, freelance without the glamour. Mm-hmm. And then you know, I'm half Jamaican, half Zimbabwean, and I was raised in a Pan-Africanist household. So my parents, you know, are surrounded by radical Black literature of the diaspora. You know, my dad loved Paul Robeson, and you know, my mother was just like, yeah, surrounded us with all the Black feminist literature that we can handle, the Alice Walkers, Toni Morrison, Zora Neale Hurston, Dorothy West, you know, so I was raised with all of these books. And my dad was a teacher, and my mom worked for the local government, so very kind of like lower middle class, very Black respectability, not kind of like you know, you guys have like the Jack and Jill sort of
Yeah.
stuff. It wasn't, it didn't have that sort of formality to it. We were just kind of, yeah, North London's black lower middle classes. Not the money, but the sensibility, and you know, everyone having, all my parents' friends having had a colonial education in Africa or the Caribbean.
Mm.
Yeah, I was raised to see my blackness like diasporically.
So that
And
explains a lot because you're explaining how you make connection with Black Lives Matter in the UK, and you know how you know your work has connection with people over here in the US. So can you give me some kind of is there a direct connection between actions taken here that affect the UK?
I think more so now.
Trans community, because I see like with the you know, with the uprising based on George Floyd, that there was a big uprising in the UK as well.
Global. Oh yeah, absolutely. Because I'm in Berlin right now, and you know, yeah, you're seeing like BLM graffiti in like the suburbs, and yeah, you know, it's a whole thing. So yeah, I think obviously there's been a globalization, and the impact of globalization means that we're receiving the news at the same time.
Yeah.
So like even taking into account this past weekend with our 3 girls in LA, receiving it at the same time. You know, it's the last. It might be, you know, on your phone in the afternoon. It's what I see just before I go to bed. So you know, we are receiving news at the same like pace, same cycle, etc., and concurrently. So that is definitely happening. What I would say though is that, particularly from the UK and the US standpoint, because of like US cultural imperialism, we were receiving like a deluge of all of your products. And for us as Black people, we would have like a few shows on UK television. We had The Real McCoy, we had Desmond's and things. But, you know, when I was growing up, I was so enamored with The Cosby Show. And you know, my mother bought Essence and Ebony and everything, and you pay, it was a bit more expensive, but we were just really dependent on that just for ways to speak about Blackness, to speak about ourselves. And like the waves of Black culture, I loved like at the end of the late 90s when Neo Soul waved over with the Lauryn Hill, the Erykah Badu, and the Jill Scott and stuff. So it was rich, and so we were really receiving all of the Moeshas and the sisters and everything. That was all coming towards us. I think with the expansion of media, there has been a bit more of a dialogue and stuff. So you know, it's been great seeing, you know, you guys like watching I May Destroy You, and you know, certain people in hip hop paying attention to grime. You know, Drake loves us, you know, and stuff. So there is a bit more of a dialogue. But I wrote about for my my friend's media platform, Dweller, which is it's a media platform about Black techno DJs and stuff, and I was writing about just the responsibility that we have, you know, because I know that I am exotic everywhere but the UK. Right. So I know when I came to the US, you like, because of my accent and everything, I was treated as, you know, oh, not like those Blacks, you know. So, you know, there's kind of we're stratified against each other.
People don't understand that. You don't understand. One of the reasons why every time a British actor comes over and gets an acting job, there's this dialogue within our African American community about why y'all couldn't find any African American actors. Why do y'all keep coming over here? Da 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 da. And I was like, we know that anything, whether it be hair, features, color, accent, anything that does not connect you to African American makes you exotic in America. So if you have the voice, if you are from the motherland, you are just something different. You're not these ratchet, urban, ghetto African Americans from here that's lazy, that's da-da-da-da-da, all the racist tropes. When you have something special about you, you are a different kind of black.
Because what the inference is that, that the accent that we have means that we've had some sort of superior education, and so they're a bit more. But conversely, the thing is, when obviously I completely sympathize with your subject position, but what I think is absent from that conversation is that black actors go to the US because they can't get work in the UK. They're not getting employed. The jobs aren't there. And so the path is that they'll go to a very decent drama school. They'll go to the RADAs, the Lambdas, the Central School of Theatre and Drama. They'll do their Shakespeares, they'll do their Beckett's, etc. And they'll get out and there's no jobs for them. And so, and then they look over across to the US and they see, crime dramas and, maybe, Kerry Washington's going to go on maternity leave or something, and stuff. Just swindle my way in. And I think when there's when black British actors come to the US, I don't know intimately, but I imagine that the schmoozing possibilities are just a bit broader. You go to a few parties, everyone likes the way you talk, they think you look really smooth and really cute. And conversely, when African Americans come to the UK and Europe in general, there's this veneer of cool, there's nothing that excites there's nothing that excites our whites more, basically,
than a cool American.
Literally, because also there isn't that level of guilt, because it's for them it's like, it's kind of, there's a cleaner break. I don't have any familial connections to the plantations in Alabama, Louisiana, and Georgia and stuff.
Until I go to my ancestor DNA and it takes me all the way to the UK, Great Britain, and da-da-da-da-da-da.
They got around.
Right.
But yeah, I think it's interesting for us from an artistic perspective, because we have this long tradition of moving to each other's countries to escape the oppression that we've been grown up with, like with James Baldwin, Josephine Baker, the conditions that they were living in were so oppressive that coming over here, cashing in on their American exoticism, but also enjoying a certain level of freedom and liberty, because they just you're not oppressed in the same way. And for me,
and I want to make that very clear, it's not that they're not oppressed, it's they're just not oppressed in certain
exactly. It feels fresh. That's it. So you got used to a particular kind of shackle, and you go somewhere else and
these ones got velvet on them.
Yes. Exactly. And like I was saying, I come from a very low middle class family, but we always had the opportunity to travel. And so my parents always took us on holidays, and my family is spread out quite well. My grandma had 10 children so I've got aunts in Tennessee, Georgia, Florida, Mexico, China, and they're Jamaican, so wherever they've always got 2 or 3 jobs, so, but what I think is, I mentioned that because with my dad's side, with my dad being Zimbabwean too, now we were always taught that the diaspora, the African diaspora in particular, was open to us, that there were places where you could go and find family and even if it's not literal, that you can at least go find somewhere where you can feel like somewhat familiar. And so like there's something that happens with when you get a bit too loud on the UK, so if you get a bit too outspoken, you know what our white pundits love to say, you know, well, if it's so racist here, why don't you leave? You know, because and it's a very kind of it's a newer way of saying, you know,
Go back to Africa.
go back to exactly. But you know, because of my particular like class position, I've been kind of like Viola Davis, you know, with the Celine handbag. I'm like, okay, like, literally, I do not need to stay where I'm not wanted, and maybe because like in terms of my education and when I went to university and that sort of thing, I was raised. I came into contact with like, you know, concepts of like the Afropolitan and whatever. You know, there was this like the just that like the black bourgeois kind of like modern mover and shaker that you raised. You know, you were able to like, you know, just pop over somewhere with your nice little woven bag and stuff, and you can get by. I think before the BLM outsurgence of 2013, there was a bit more of that kind of shallow, you know, kind of like, yeah, just like cheap, colourful, you know, I can go anywhere kind of. But I think that aesthetic, particularly, because I think it was more predominantly more an aesthetic than a lived reality for many people. But I've always wanted to focus on my own agency and see like, how can I move away from the worst of the violence and stuff. And yeah, right now with everything that's going on, I'm really aware that even I can do that, but most of the people from my communities can't do that. And it's been my proximity to whiteness via rich white men in relationships and sex work and stuff that has given me the ability to elide a few situations and move into experiences that have been fruitful for me. Yeah, writing professionally is not something that's like easy and open to everyone. It's a really elitist way of life. So yeah, I'm really conscious about it. If I hadn't had particular relationships, if I hadn't gone to my school in a particular area or met a particular man at a particular time, it probably wouldn't have happened for me.
So let me ask this. So we were talking about it in our initial conversations about the different kind of areas that trans women particularly are in, like, you know, and even other gender nonconforming people in certain parts of the working class spaces, and you know, right. It was something that you would call the council estates, and then the tower block culture. Can you explain those different things? Because I want people to understand that although they're under different names, we have these same exact spaces in America. And that the same racism and the same caste structure is maybe called something different, but it's the same exact thing. Explain that to me.
So yeah, in a European context, basically, the council estate or the tower block will be the equivalent to your projects. And so, and in France, for example, in like Paris and Marseille, like working class black, brown, Arab communities are on the outskirts of the city, so they would be called les banlieues, like, you know, the suburbs. And so the brutalist architecture of like the post-war period, you know, the huge tower blocks and like, you know, really boxy, like, you know, ready-made communities.
Exactly how. So in like New York, like the Marcy Projects, all those buildings. And in Chicago, Cabrini Green, where, you know, it's just buildings erected to be, you know, maybe not have the same history, but what they are right now. You know? Yeah,
and it's like, it's a place where I always feel like a dream has died because when I went to Marseille and I saw it's the architect's called Le Corbusier who created these tower blocks, and what his thinking was that that you would like elevate living from like off of the streets, everything would be contained within the building. So you'd have your shops there, you'd have your nursery there, you'd have your playgrounds, your basketball courts, your football fields, etc., etc. And outside Marseille, there's still like a couple of buildings that he originally designed, and then also others that him was in the middle of London, a place called the Barbican, where rich white people live very well. Because they stick to because they continue to receive investment for. Unfortunately, they built too quickly, and eventually the investment just stopped. And so the working class communities that live there now, they're so grey, they're so depressing, but they are still communities. And so for us as queer, trans, and gender non-conforming people, in living in these communities, I think there's often the belief that we're some new, fandangled 1987, kind of gender. But I was always very aware that the most visible gender non-conforming one would take the sins for the whole community. So, like for my mother growing up in Jamaica, for example, she would, they always say, "Oh no, there was no gays around, there were no trans around," and stuff. But then, like, that's not true, because she would say, "No, there was this one guy called Cutie," and she would talk about Cutie who would be walking around, and he just had a little special walk. He just had a walk, and she did the walk. He was definitely. And my mum would always say, "Well, yeah, there must have been others, because he would need someone to be gay with, So,
right, Mama, clock that T."
Exactly. But then also for me, I found I think it's the phrase you use, a little sugar in the tank. I was incredibly swishy from a very young age.
What do y'all call it?
What do we call? Just puffy, like puffy.
Puffy.
It's a little bit sweet. If you're Jamaican, a little bit sweet. A little bit sweet, isn't it? Yeah. But yeah, I can't really go any further because it's just too blue. But but yeah, I found my parents didn't anticipate that they would have a child who would be carrying the sins of the community. And I really was, because I was easily identifiable, I was very visible. And I was also very vulnerable, because I was so visibly femme and effeminate. Even though I would be harassed, like verbally and physically, I was also very sexually, like, pointed out, that I like people would just identify you as someone who was worthy of being othered, but also who they could do stuff to and no one would care, no one would find out. They would. There was a whole culture that there would be this one person in the community who, would be treated in a particular way. And so I don't think it was until I got to organise political spaces and university and stuff where I found my people and discovered that. I mean, that's not quite true. I was reading a lot of James Baldwin growing up. I read like Giovanni's Rue at the age of like 12, 13, and I knew of I knew of trans people, but it just felt impossible because they were just so distant and glamorous. Like in the 90s, it was like always like, it was like winning the lottery. I just thought I couldn't, like, there wasn't anyone nearby who I could say, oh, okay, you know, I'm going to become friends with her, find out where she gets her minds from, and transition myself. Like, because of the way that I was treated and spoken about and felt about myself, you know, being fat, black, and, you know, told how ugly I was all the time. I didn't feel like I was eligible to be the transsexual glamazon that I've grown to be.
It was a barrier. It felt like a barrier.
Right, exactly. And stuff. So with that, it took me escaping my communities in North London in order to, you know, fully manifest and find my people and fall in love and all of that sort of stuff. But in doing so, you know, I lost contact with a lot of I lost contact with everyone basically. Like, I have my best friends and my sister and everything, but I needed to move away for my own safety. And in doing so, when I then came into political organizing, it was I always felt like I really couldn't go back with everything that I was learning, because I was born in 1985, and so much was going on around me, and I thought that they were just individual cases. I didn't know what was I didn't have the language. I didn't know what was systemic, but which is unusual because my parents met in Brixton in South London in the early 80s, and they met on a campaign. It's called the Scrap Sus campaign. Basically, the police used to have these laws, the sus laws, and what that meant was that they were able to stop people who they suspected of being about to commit a crime. And so obviously the people that they felt suspicious of tended
Black.
to be black.
Oh, the OGs is doing the same way as us.
They just be singing the car, you know, kind of, oh, looks like that nigger looks like they're niggering, you know. And so what would happen was in the 70s is that, you know, these young people would just be disappeared, you know, and their parents would have to go down to the police station and find out what they were taken in for and all that sort of thing. So my mother was working at the Brixton Law Centre, and my dad did maths at university, and he came there to do the statistics on the different, they were collating data, basically. And they both worked to get the sus law scrapped, along with some other notable community leaders. Like Olive Morris and
What years was that?
this was in the 80s, like late 70s, early 80s.
Do y'all have any data now? Because, you know, that sounds like the 3 strikes law that was happening here in America, where, you know, there was a mass uptick in mass incarceration during the early 90s. Do y'all have any data?
Era, is that Reagan?
Say it again.
So for the mass incarceration, is that like a Biden-Clinton era thing, or is that earlier? Was that Reagan?
Not Biden, it was Clinton.
Clinton, okay, cool.
Well, Biden was a part of it too, but you know, it was Clinton.
Right.
Reagan did some stuff too with the war on drugs.
That's Predator thing.
Yes, that Super Predator, where the 92 campaign was one of the most, it was supposed to be tough on crime, but it also was one of the most racist campaign strategies of, you know, there are racists, but, you know, it was a particularly viciously racist campaign to get him to be president, and he actually won. It's ironically, for white women, this is one of the first times that their voting record leaned in favor of Democrats because usually they lean in favor of Republicans. But this is
Right.
one of the first time that it leaned more in favor of Democrats because it was one of the most racist
Right.
campaigns. And so, yes, do y'all have any data of how it's affecting Black people now in the UK? Those decades of being arrested, or did they have the same effects that maybe like ours did? Because now we're seeing just different data come out now that are proving how it affected the Black communities. Are y'all seeing the same kind of impact?
Yeah, we have the film 1500 and Counting, which was made by Sienna Bangura, which is about deaths in police custody, and the fact that I think it's the IPCC, so that's the Internal Police Commission. So it's basically the police investigating the police about deaths in custody. And
like that's y'all version of the FBI.
Of sorts, not quite, because I feel like the FBI is like, no, you know, so you know, like in I'm showing all my propaganda now. I'm gonna bring up my Law and Order SVU knowledge. So it's you know when like so a cop will like kill someone, and then like a department from within the police will come to like interview them about whether they killed someone, whether they were justified. You know, they've got to speak to the attorney, whatever. It's basically, it's not quite the FBI, but it's a police. It's maybe
like the DA.
Former officers who will come in and investigate police officers, basically.
Okay.
But
I don't even think we have that. Man, police officers, police. What? Yeah, right.
But the T is that basically we've never had a police conviction for anyone who's died in police.
Of course not.
And with regards to data collection, we have organisations like the Runnymede Trust. We used to have the Commission for Racial Equality, which was disbanded and absorbed into an Equal Rights Commission thing, which was nefarious in its intentions. But anyway, so basically the data's there, and every few years, you know, they will have another investigation, and there's more reports, and then they're going to apply the reports. But the one which really sparked everything off in terms of highlighting the institutional racism within these institutions was the Stephen Lawrence case. Stephen Lawrence was a young Black man who was murdered by a group of white thugs in 1993 and stabbed to death on the streets. And the police were really inefficient and inadequate in their investigation of that murder. It was, you know, the murderers were white supremacists. They were, you know, they belonged to the British National Party or something. Or like, you know, I'm not committing my journalistic record here, but yeah, like proper white racists. Just say, you know,
proper white racists.
And so, as a result of the McPherson inquiry, I think it was, there were basically they assessed the police and decided that they could say definitively that the police are institutionally racist. This was in the early 90s. This did not lead to any justice for the Lawrence family. And in fact, a number of weeks ago, the case was downgraded once again because they said that they couldn't find the evidence. And so, the men who killed him are still very much out there. But
living their lives, making more racist babies.
There we are.
Impregnating their racist wives and continuing the legacy of their racism. Mm-hmm.
But along with all of the violence that was, I was like, you know, encouraged to get used to in my childhood, I just remember the faces of you know, these people, like, it would appear on the news, you know, there would always be like this one picture. So, you know, the picture of Stephen Lawrence is indelibly imprinted on my mind. Also, Cynthia Jarrett, who is a black woman who was murdered by police. I think they were looking for her son in 1985.
They were looking for her son?
Yes, and this was on Broadwater Farm, which is a notorious estate in Tottenham in North London. I went to school nearby and I was raised nearby. And so,
y'all, when y'all hear estate, that's the hood over there.
Yeah, it's not Downton Abbey. It's not.
No. So here, when we hear estate, that's class and distinction, baby.
No orchards.
Yes, they are. The estates in the UK is the project, the hood.
Much more cement than apple cider, promise. So yeah, basically the riots of 1985 were a result of that murder. You know, it was another resurgence. But then there was also Joy Gardner in 1993, a Jamaican woman who came here. Her family moved here. You know, she was trying to become a citizen, but because the laws of immigration had changed in 1981, her family, because they're coming from Jamaica, which was a former colony, and so they come here and they were able to do it, but because she was coming later, the Thatcher government, you know, Reagan's best friend, you know, they changed all of that because they didn't want any more. Okay, we rebuild. Come over after second
Y'all
World War.
niggas need to stay in Jamaica.
So much for the nurses. Thanks ever so much for that's
for our nannies.
A bit too dusky. Okay, we've got 1 to 3%. We're good, thanks. So, so yeah, basically there was a police unit that was formed, kind of similar to ICE. And so, you know, she was in the appeal system. Like, you know, they'd tried to report her stuff, but like she'd done what needed to be done. She'd reported to the police station, etc., etc. But yeah, they went to her house in Crouch End, and yeah, they restrained her, tied up hands, feet, and then taped her mouth as well. And then she died of asphyxiation and stuff. And I mean, one's traumatized all the time because, like, I think like every time.
Wait, give me some context here. Do they use guns?
So no, I think they're able to carry guns now, but they don't use guns in the same. There aren't as many like shootouts as yeah, one would expect in the American context. You wouldn't see that as much here, like but of course we do have firearms, but nowhere near to the level that you guys do. And so
thinking that's quite interesting because even without the firearms in that situation,
right,
a black person still died. She was still died of asphyxiation. Yeah.
When I think we're able to see the diversity, the nuance, the complexity in each other, you know, that we see, you know, you got hood girls, you got the studious man, you got you know, black girls that like to knit and black boys that like to dance. You know, so we understand that we are human, you know? But in the white imagination, like they just see an animal that needs to be contained. And so, yeah, I think that's why there are those similarities, in spite of the absence of firearms, that we will still be treated as these beasts that need to be tamed. I was scared for my life, and as a result, I needed to put them in restraints. I needed to tape her up, etc., etc., etc.
Tell me this.
With the gun issue, like the upsurges that occurred in 2008 with Mark Duggan's death, you know, there was just so much in the news about, you know, him not being from, you know, that he was involved in stuff and whatever, and that when the police were chasing him down, they thought that they'd see him throw away a gun or whatever. But I think what is most revealing is that the British media, there's a picture that was used of him, you know, where his face is like all contour, like it looks contorted. He's got like a really solid brow, and he's leaning in. And he's like looking like, you know, like he's got a lot on his mind. They made him look quite rough and serious. But I didn't know this until like this year, and the picture that they used of him was a picture of him at someone else's funeral. And you know, so what they'd done is that he was holding this like flower bouquet, like a donation for this person who passed away. And obviously it's not a day on which he's at his happiest. And so they'd use this picture of him in his grief, you know. Intentionally to show that, you know, there's this like really mean looking black guy who, like, you know, has been killed by the police, but, you know, don't worry about that one. He was a bit of a bad egg and stuff. So we are really used to being betrayed by media. We're really used to hearing of the police hunting us down like animals and hitting us. We've got the data, we've got the investigations, we've got all of that. And at this point, and there's a lot of stalling, and they've learned the talking points. And whenever we send our best and our brightest, you know, we send on the Afua Hirsches and the Akalas and whatever onto these panel shows, you know, to go and speak with these white pundits, and we're just, you know, what about so and so, and what about this, and what about that, and they're really obfuscating, because they don't want to get to the truth. You know, they don't want to undo any of the injustices that have happened. They don't really. They don't want. They're really scared of change, and I think they're really scared of vengeance. And I think something for me as a Black Briton is that I'm always aware that my parents and my grandparents always mentioned what it was like when Enoch Powell's "Rivers of Blood" speech. This was a white supremacist politician who warned white English people that one day that the black man will have the whip over the white man, and that rivers of blood will flow in the streets. And even though it's not spoken of in any sort of, that's not cited anymore as a landmark speech. But for me, when I speak to white people and I hear them skirt around the issue of discussing race and stuff, I feel it's still one of their biggest fears, that, you know, if they let too many of us come over with all of our colonial grievances, that eventually we will seek vengeance for everything that was done to us. And yeah, all of the riches that are hoarded up in these various different institutions, the British Museum, at the Bank of England, and whatever, that they are scared of how far we will take that redistribution.
Right. So tell me about Naomi Hersey and keeping that story alive. Tell me about the story, and then the actions that's been taken to keep that story alive.
Absolutely. I mean, the story of Naomi Hersey most closely aligns with the stories of Black trans murders in the US and Brazil. I think it came as a shock. The details of her murder came as a shock to us because before her murder, I think there was this belief that, you know, okay, it's terrible in the US, it's terrible in Brazil, it's terrible, but, you know, not here. You know, not with our laws. You know, that we're a bit more civilized. I found out about her murder in, I think it was March 2018 that she passed away. Yeah. She was involved with, she was sexually involved with this white guy, and they were having like a chemsex weekender, basically. Sorts. It was it was the Tina, it was the G, it was the all sorts. And they must have been having a good time because they moved from one location to another. I think they were staying at her. I think he probably come around to her flat or something, and then they moved to a hotel. And on the way to that hotel, they went via a supermarket. So yeah, they went to a supermarket to go and get supplies, and then go somewhere and do a bit more. This is a whole scene, like, in terms of the impact of drug addiction on our communities is really severe. And she was a fun time girl. She was a party girl. She, you know what I mean, as it goes. So this, her embarking on this sexual interaction was not something that she would have anticipated ending in her death. Now, no one knows. It was just the two of them in the hotel room, and no one knows what the conversation led to, what happened to cause him to murder her. But basically, she was stabbed to death, rolled up in a carpet, and left to the side. One can assume maybe he's coming down, paranoia, etc., etc., etc. Her murderer calls his girlfriend and his mother, and this is a real good sign of like the impact of the media and transparent media on people, because he knew to say that he had been kidnapped by this big black man, that he there was also they know the meaning of what of their words, that this was some sort of Nigerian drug dealer, etc. So yeah, everything that connotes danger in the mind of the white imagination, he knew to employ. Misgender her, refer to her as African, focus on her side, whatever. His girlfriend came along to clean up the mess
with him.
So the girlfriend, he's gone on this like drugs bender, not told anyone where he's been, whatever. And then after he's murdered her, he calls up his girlfriend, who drives down from a thing to go and clean up the murder scene. So I think they did that, and then when that's happening, I think he has a phone call with his mother, where he's off on one, and his mother, hearing about all of the lies that he's telling, been kidnapped, drug dealers, blah blah blah, calls the police, and so the police then go to locate him, find Naomi's body, etc. Now, this impacted me as an individual because Naomi is me. Naomi was me. Like there was a time when I was living her life. Like when I was in the depths of my drug and alcohol addiction. This is the sort of scenario that made, that I was. This was what I was doing, and so whereas other people would find it really easy to stigmatize her and say, she had addiction problems, what she's doing there, etc. For me, as someone who was able to arrest my addiction and get out of that life, I can't then look at my sister and say, oh, you're so much more beneath me. I could very easily have died many a time. And so her death definitely held a mirror up to me as where I would have ended up if I hadn't have found sobriety. Mm. There's also the tea that we...
And I want to clarify that a little bit too. In not finding sobriety does not mean that you deserve to die. Mm-mm. Not finding sobriety, you know, you have a right, even in the midst of your sobriety, to live. So they don't give anybody permission to get you together.
Does not. It doesn't. And what I think, thank you for highlighting that. Actually, thank you, because that really does diminish a lot of the shame that I have. But what I think, the reason that I feel the need to say that is because I've looked into the eyes of so many men and seen that murderous intent. That, you know, I feel like that the fact that when I was in rehab, I was telling people the stories about what my life was like before I got sober and stuff. There was one guy who said, you know, I can't believe that you made it through intact. You know, that you can be assaulted so many times, have so many rock bottoms, so many lucky escapes, and, you know, have got out and still feel whole. And so you're absolutely right. But, you know, just because of patriarchal violence and just the realities of what our lives are like, I think it's part of me is always just like really aware that definitely could have been me. It's also the tea that we shared a lot of sexual partners. You know, the men that I was talking to at the time all knew her. And so I felt like I'd lost a friend that I'd never known. You know, I would have, I only got to know of her in death, but I just felt really close to her in the aftermath. And because I was speaking to a lot of men who had known her in the biblical sense as well as whatever, I found myself having to be a counselor for these men who are on the DL or whatever, but at the end of the day, they were grieving this woman that they'd known and they had no one to speak about it with. And so I was in this unusual position of helping them to share, just being a receptacle for their memories. You know, we helped her, we had a vigil for her in South London, and, you know, I was, you know, communicating with all my different Black trans sisters in the community and stuff, so we were writing about her and stuff, but
it's kind of interesting that you say that, because I remember this girl in Mississippi when I was living there. She had passed away, and I was talking to a guy that knew her, and when I asked him about, like, you know, just he had been dating her, like he had brought her to his mom, like they were in, I don't want to say a relationship, but that's what it was. Like it was, like it was, they was, you know, engaging. They had an entanglement, bitch. It was an entanglement, and my homegirl called me, and she told me that none of her trade didn't come to her funeral. And he called me, and I was like, "Why didn't you go to Keisha's funeral?" And he was like, "Oh, we wasn't on that level." And I was like, "You are lying." And I think you're lying to me because you think like you have a chance with me. Like, sweetie, I know you're lying. Like, so don't tell me that lie. Y'all were in an entanglement together. And it was more than just wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. Because she had met your parents, you had met her people, you were friends with, you came over and her friends knew you. Like, y'all were in something more than just a hookup. And I know how you are. So be real with me. Why didn't you go to her funeral? And he said, because he was like, it was supposed to be on the low, and it was getting bigger than what he intended for it to be. And he said he knew that if he went to that funeral, he wouldn't be able to live that down. He was like, I could just let the rumor just die with the situation. And I was like, you are so fucking trash. And it made me feel so uncomfortable, because I was like, I was thinking about people that I deal with, and
Right.
they wouldn't have the audacity, the courtesy, not audacity, the courtesy to go to my funeral. And I stopped fucking with him. Like, I literally stopped talking to him. I blocked him because I was so annoyed that this person that you were having sex with, that you were in intimate relationship with, not just like literally not wham bam thank you ma'am, like literally y'all laid up, you spent the night at her house, blah blah blah. I know the intimacy of y'all relationship, and you couldn't even come to this lady's funeral. Get the fuck out of here. I'm not talking to you. You're whack.
Yeah. It's really defining. And since then, I had to draw a line in the sand. As a result, anyone who I'm dealing with or I'm dealt with, you know, I have their numbers. I give them to my nearest and dearest. If anything happens to me, call these people. I expect it. And I talk about it. I'm like, you know, unfortunately, as an individual, but also just as a community with the genocidal intent that's out there for us, you know, I'm so conscious of being taken too soon, like wanting to live a long, happy life as a Black trans woman is an audacious ambition currently.
It's revolutionary.
Right? And so, you know, I'm preparing. I prepared for that. It was also the case that, because for me as a journalist, I was commissioned to write about her sentencing, the sentencing of her murderer, which took place in late 2018, autumn 2018. And so I was in Brighton at the time, and I travelled up to London to go to the Old Bailey. That's like our big national court in London. And so, I was writing for Vice, and my editor had said, you know, make sure you get quotes from like the neighbours and family and stuff. And it was raining buckets. You know, I got caught in the rain. I had to go and buy like a new jumper from Marks and Spencer's and stuff. And I bought a white jumper. And so I went to the courthouse, and you have to put all of your belongings in a shop down the road because you can't go in there with like your phone or anything. So I went into the sentencing, and I didn't plan it this way. But obviously I was the only Black trans woman in that courtroom. So when I went into the public gallery, you know, it's a bit higher than the courtroom. And the way that it made me feel was that I was this sort of like Black trans angel, you know, who come in to witness these proceedings. Like he couldn't look at me. You know, the prosecution like was, you know, just started like fluffing up and stuff because just the way that I was positioned, they felt suddenly like like they were being judged in a completely different way. Her brothers turned up, and there was a neighbor who was just so rattled. She was completely okay. And so, you know, I witnessed this, and he got 7 years. He won't serve that. But I couldn't do my job as a journalist that day because what I've been asked to do was to get quotes from the family and thing, and they were so cut up. I just couldn't do it. I had to respect their spirit. I had to respect the mood of the room, and I just I wasn't able to do what I needed to do as a journalist, but just as a person, I felt like I did what needed to be done. Witnessed the sentencing, was there for her, and since then, I just tried to make sure that I can bring her name up whenever possible. I'm always looking out for. She deserves so much. She deserves a plaque. She deserves a statue. She deserves to be remembered. She was charismatic. She loved the color yellow. She loved tennis. You know, everyone I speak to was just so touched by her spirit. And so, you know, if I get to have a long time on this earth, the least I can do is to make sure that her name is remembered.
Well, I think that's beautiful. I think that we all are hoping you know, I'm glad that y'all are not having the numbers that we are. In 2020, we have already doubled the numbers in 2019. And I definitely want all of the trans women who are, who have been murdered and taken from us too soon, absolutely too soon, to be memorialized and remembered. And, you know, I hope that you all's does too.
You know, we're very, I mean, we speak about the connection that we have as Black trans women across the diaspora. Like, we are very much affected. Like, please don't think that you are on your own. I know, like, I know how hard it is, like, seeing the disparity in the treatment of Black trans murders in comparison to other people's. And I know that it's necessary to point out that it's crickets. I understand that. There's never crickets in my bedroom. There's never crickets over here. We care. We are just... I am overwhelmed by the impact that it's having on you all, the impact that it's having on me, on my mental health. It's just so rough.
Yeah.
And you know, what's really hurting me now is that I'm getting the names mixed up and I can't keep track of detail. You know, is it Malaysia Book? Look, when I heard about Malaysia Booker, I genuinely when I heard that she'd been killed, my brain wouldn't accept it. I was like, no, that video that happened a month ago, and that's two separate women. I refused to allow the two nexus of violence to fuse together. I couldn't believe it. How? We all saw the video. We you know, shares, GoFundMes and Cash Apps, and you would hope, we just thought, okay, that was definitely the worst of it. To get over the humiliation of being beaten in a sun-drenched street. To have people coagulate around you. To be standing on a stage where you're hugged and, like, you know, those beautiful lashes that she loved to wear. I thought, okay, so she'll be taken somewhere. I know I just thought, I didn't think to investigate further. I thought, oh, okay. So maybe she's being, I don't know. I don't know the geography of America, but I thought, I don't know, like, maybe they'll move her to, like, Baton Rouge or somewhere, or, like, you know, like, she'll go to, I don't know, just somewhere different, somewhere, say, in my mind, like, having the mind of a writer, I just saw her on an open road going somewhere safe. And hearing that was just, I can't make sense of it. I really can't. And, like, the escapism that is necessary for me right now, because I love happy endings, I love meaningful endings. I'm always trying to find a route for it, but right now I can't see it. I really can't. And I think it's because, you know, we're being called to be there for people. People expect me to be out on these marches. Okay, they expect me to be out on these marches, marching for these Black men who want me dead. You know, and who am I supposed to speak that to? I'm supposed to go and have a little coffee with a white liberal and speak about the complexities of this? Do you know what I mean? Like, right. Where's the next? Am I supposed to talk to them, the Black men, or am I supposed to talk to the cis women who don't even want me in their space?
Like, you got me emotional because like we're in Texas and we were in the position to help, and fucking allies put us, got in the way of us helping. And because they had more resources, they were not a trans-led org, and they had more resources than us, and we couldn't do anything. But we had the capacity to do it. But because they were so fucking trying to be tokens, they were trying to use her as a fucking as this bullhorn of them doing the work, when you motherfuckers don't even have the capacity to do the work because y'all don't have trans people empowered to teach you how to do it.
Right.
So I felt the same way. We didn't know how this is fucking possible after that happened. But
I think it's so clear how fearful they are of our power. That the idea of us in leadership positions it makes them shake. And so like they have this panicked reaction to the thought. I think people feel like when we talk about centering Black trans women that we're still in the theory stage. The amount of times when it's been very clear to everyone in the room that I'm the one with the most knowledge. Period. Right?
You have me on this I've been on panels, particularly in the past 3 months during this COVID shit. You have me on panels and it is clear, fucking clear. I'm the person who knows what needs to be done in this space when we're talking about this particular issue. Like you got to get it together. We know how to fix our shit. We just don't have the resources and the power to do it. Give it up.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's I think it's really galling, and even though at the beginning of this call I said that, I left the UK because I could and I wanted to, but I just got so sick of being snubbed. I got so sick, of having to, borrow this for it and that, and, applying for this role, getting some, like, being sidelined here and whatever. And, during June, when, we were getting, like, the White Guilt Money Fund and stuff, I did cash in, but at the same time, I knew how little it was in comparison to what I needed and deserved. So, we deserve more than we deserve a lot more than, 3 to 6 weeks of donations. It's not going to cut it. It's unsustainable.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to hold you too much. And I want to thank you for coming on, and thank you for sharing your expertise about over there and being in solidarity with us over here. And
I love you guys.
Yeah, and supporting March's Play. I just love that you support us, and and you share. You're one of the first people that shared our platform over in the UK. I really and me, Diamond Stylz, on in telling me and things that I said. So I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. And
literally a career high for me. Literally, this is my Oprah's couch. Okay, yeah, keep it. This is my soul session. Like we're good.
Thank you. Tell them where they can find you.
They can find me at Kuchenga. That's Kuchenga on Instagram, and that's also Kucheng on Twitter. But yeah, for like a more solid dive into my writing, you can just find me at Kuchenga.com.
And I will put all of those links in the bottom. And thank you all for listening. Yeah. Hey.
Yeah.
Thank you, darling.